Welcome into OutKick the show. I am your fearless leader, Clay Travis. Appreciate all of you hanging out with me as we are rolling through the Wednesday edition of the program. Appreciate all of you out there with us. Let me start off right now. PrizePicks, America's #1 daily fantasy sports app with PrizePicks. You against the number, NBA, NHL, Major League Baseball, whatever your sport is. All you have to do is pick more or less on every athlete basically on the planet, and you can win up to 2,000 times your money. Whatever you think about the playoffs, hot take on the NHL, NBA, Major League Baseball, you can get hooked up right now, and I have a pick for you to cash and win big right now. Jalen Brunson, he's been on fire. I cannot imagine that this is not going to hit in Game 5 of the series against the Celtics. More than 1.5 three-pointer made by Jalen Brunson. John Tavares, this is Adam's pick. I'm going to give him credit if we hit. It's all his fault if we don't hit. More than 1.5 shots on goal tonight in the Toronto versus Florida game. I know nothing about this. I'm trusting him. And Austin Riley, Braves are back to 500 after starting 0-7. Tonight against the Nationals, Austin Riley, more than 1.5 hit. So if all of this hits, then you will win a little bit less than 2-1. Jalen Brunson, I feel like this is almost guaranteed. Jalen Brunson, more than 1.5 three-pointers made. John Tavares, more than 1.5 shots on goal. And Austin Riley, more than 1.5 hit. Download the app today. Use code OutKick for $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. You can play in California. You can play in Texas. You can play in Georgia. That is, download the app today. Code OutKick, $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, run your game. All right, let's run the game here. And the game is, how could we have ever known that there was mental and physical deterioration for Joe Biden? This is the #1 story everywhere being discussed. As I told you yesterday, George Clooney comes out and says Biden didn't recognize me, even though we had known each other for 15 years, talked that Biden was going to have to be in a wheelchair. And the Jake Tappers of the world, and I'm going to get to Jake Tapper versus Laura Trump here in a moment, but the Jake Tappers of the world are all saying, how could we have known? We were just led astray by everything having to do with the lies that came out of the Biden White House. And my argument is, well, then how did your boy here know it for years? How did, by watching videos and sharing those videos, I let all of you know that Joe Biden didn't have the physical or mental cognition to be president of the United States? And it wasn't just me. Here's a guy that I think deserves a lot more credit that everybody tried to discredit and ignore. How about Minnesota Democrat Congressman Dean Phillips? This guy ran against Joe Biden and made all of the arguments that everybody in the media claimed they didn't know to be true about the fact that Joe Biden didn't have the mental and physical ability to be president. He was the only Democrat who was willing to be honest. And he based his entire run for the nomination on the fact that Biden didn't have the mental and physical capability to be president. And do you know what the media did? They pretended he was lying. They pretended he wasn't making real, honest arguments. Why is Dean Phillips not on every television program in America right now taking a victory lap for being the only Democrat that was willing to speak the truth to the American public? I suspect the reason he's not on CNN or MSNBC is because it proves that all those media members now that are telling you, man, we were lied to, we never could have seen this ourselves, actually weren't lied to. They were willing to help Biden as long as they could. And until Biden was no longer viable as president, and until Kamala Harris was no longer viable as president, they weren't willing to tell this story because it might hurt the Democrat Party. That's the truth, right? That's how the New York Times missed it. That's how the Washington Post missed it. That's how CNN missed it, MSNBC, NBC, CBS, ABC. They all have reporters in the White House following Biden around everywhere. And they didn't see this? And somehow me, from my OutKick studio in Nashville, where we do Clay and Buck and where I do OutKick, just by getting on social media, could tell from the videos of Biden when he was at D-Day and he had no idea what was going on, when he was at the G7, when he was shouting out dead congressmen, when he was getting Israeli hostages' names wrong, when he was freezing on the lawn during music. None of them knew. They're lying to you. And Dean Phillips made the argument. His entire campaign in the Democrat primary was predicated on, hey, Biden isn't up to this anymore. We need a new candidate. And they froze him out. They wouldn't put him on television. The time he made the most news was when he threw an event in New Hampshire and nobody showed up. Every Democrat primary voter in New Hampshire, in Iowa, they all had an opportunity to recognize that Biden wasn't okay, and they all didn't care because all they cared about was Biden being in power. They didn't care about his health. They didn't care about his cognition. They didn't care about his physical frailty. They were willing to do whatever it took so long as Biden was able to stay in power. And the one guy in their party who was willing to point all this out during the primary season, Minnesota Congressman Dean Phillips, they completely ignored him. And I think this guy deserves some commendation, some credit, some legitimate praise for being willing to make all of this happen and speak truth to power in a time when almost no one else would. So my credit to Minnesota Congressman Dean Phillips. And let me just say this. I said it last night on Hannity, but I want to echo it again today. Jake Tapper owes a public apology to Laura Trump. Laura Trump went on his show, pointed out Joe Biden's physical and mental cognitive issues in October of 2020. Jake Tapper shouted her down, refused to allow her to make the argument that she wanted to make on his show, and said that Joe Biden had a stutter and she should be ashamed of herself for suggesting that Biden had any mental or physical cognition issues. The only reason Biden got elected was because of COVID. COVID hit him in the basement. That allowed them to pretend that he was okay. They could shoot him up for the few public appearances that he had. He only had 2 debates against Trump. And as a result, he got into office the least actually challenged of any mainstream party nominee in any of our lives. He ran a presidential campaign from his basement where he occasionally did a few interviews. They hit him. They dragged him across the finish line. They claimed that anybody who criticized him in any respect was just attacking him because he had a stutter. It's actually insulting to people that do have stutters. It was a series of lies. Has Jake Tapper apologized in any way to Laura Trump? He didn't respond last night to what I said about him on Hannity. Has he ever said, hey, you know what? I'm sorry for shouting you down and claiming that Biden's issues were all just based on the fact that he had a stutter? Of course not. All of these guys and gals in media, CNN and MSNBC, were trying to keep their guest list strong by carrying water for Joe Biden until he got kicked to the curb and for Kamala Harris until she got kicked to the curb. I told you all the true stories about Biden's decline would come out. The biggest villain here to me is the media because they should be objective. But the biggest partisan villain is Jill Biden, Dr. Jill Biden. She knew. Imagine what she saw. Imagine what Dr. Jill saw when the cameras weren't there. If you have ever had someone in your family as they aged, start to lose mental and physical grasp on reality. You see it way before, typically, somebody sees it in public. I've been saying for years we only saw Joe Biden for 5% of the day. Imagine what he was like for the other 95%. Imagine what Dr. Jill saw. Imagine what the advisors that were actually close to Biden saw. The fact that he was in power is terrifying, and it also raises the question, who was the actual president of the United States for the last 2 years? Who was legitimately making these decisions? I don't know. You don't know. None of us know. But it's scary that we were allowed to get here. I want to talk about Pete Rose for a minute. Major League Baseball yesterday, Pete Rose, Shoeless Joe Jackson, other individuals that had been given lifetime bans were removed from the lifetime ban list, and that occurred because they were deceased. I think this is a little bit of a cowardly act by Major League Baseball. I think they should have returned at some point during his life Pete Rose to the eligible for the Hall of Fame list to have ended the lifetime ban. But I do think this was the right decision in general. I was at the Hall of Fame for the first time ever 2 years ago. My 12-year-old was playing in a Cooperstown, New York Little League baseball tournament up there. I got to go through the Hall of Fame. It was fabulous, super impressive to be able to tour. Pete Rose belongs in the Hall of Fame. Beyond a shadow of a doubt, without question. That doesn't mean that he was without flaw, but he belongs in the Hall of Fame. I also believe the steroid users, the Roger Clemenses of the world, the Barry Bondses of the world, that we know would have been Hall of Famers before the steroid era, even if they had not turned into the monumental offensive and pitching weapons that they became when it appears that they were likely using steroids. If we know that they were Hall of Famers no matter what, I would put them in. I would have a steroid wing of Major League Baseball where people who you could question whether or not they might have cheated, whether or not they might have used steroids, I think we could have a wing for them. But I think beyond a shadow of a doubt, Major League Baseball's hit leader, Pete Rose, belongs in the Hall of Fame. I think Shoeless Joe Jackson belongs in the Hall of Fame. It was and has been for a long time an argument on Sports Talk Radio. I think the vast majority of you agree with me that is the right decision. And so while it is belated, and while I would have preferred that it happened while Pete Rose was still alive, ultimately the right decision was made here. A couple of other stories. Derrick Henry got a 2-year guaranteed contract of $25 million. $14 million 2025, $11 million 2026. We were just talking about the Hall of Fame. I think beyond a shadow of a doubt, Derrick Henry is a first ballot, unquestioned NFL Hall of Famer. I hope that he will go in as a Tennessee Titan where most of his yardage totals were attained. He's over 30. He is a physical freak. Adam, look up where he ranks right now, if you would, on total yardage and where he ranks in the NFL right now. I think he certainly has, based on what I saw last season, at least a couple of years left. Lamar Jackson benefited immensely, I believe, from having play-action opportunities with Derrick Henry. It's not a coincidence that Lamar Jackson had his best ever downfield passing year with Derrick Henry in the backfield for teams to worry about. I don't think it's coincidental that Ryan Tannehill basically had his entire career revitalized by having play-action opportunities with Derrick Henry, because the guy is such a violent force of nature in the backfield. He is one of the, I believe, 10 best running backs of all time. I really do believe that. I think if you look at the dominance of Derrick Henry relative to his performance in the NFL today, when so many teams have 2 and 3 different backs, for him to be rushing for 2,000 yards, for him to be rushing for north of 1,500 yards for as many years as he has been able to do it is, I believe, unquestionably a top 10 resume when his career is fully done. So I'm projecting a little bit because I think he's going to run for at least 3,000 more yards. And if he is able to run for 3,000 more yards, I think that is going to propel him into a totally different stratosphere than he has ever been in before. And let me just look up, I don't know if Adam can hear me, Derrick Henry's career rushing yards and where he ranks on the all-time list. Here it is. Derrick Henry right now has 11,423 yards rushing. I think he has a good chance to get 3,000 more. That's where I would put the over-under Derrick Henry for the remainder of his career. Again, just got $25 million. If I'm right and he gets 3,000 more rushing yards, that would put him number 6 all time, and he would be within shooting distance of becoming top 5 all time. So that would put him behind Emmitt Smith, who I don't think anybody's ever going to catch. Emmitt Smith, by the way, 18,355 yards. I don't think anybody is ever going to catch Emmitt Smith. I think he will be the all-time leading NFL rusher, even if they're adding additional games, going to 18, all those things. Walter Payton, I think it's going to be very hard to catch, 16,726. And then this is a guy that nobody talks about. One of the greatest running back careers of all time. You talk about longevity. Frank Gore, 16,000 career rushing yards. How many people out there that are big NFL fans? A lot of people would get Emmitt Smith. A lot of people would get Walter Payton. How many people would guess that Frank Gore is number 3 all-time most rushing yards? Not very many. Barry Sanders obviously retired. Barry Sanders probably, if he hadn't retired at a relatively young age, I think Barry Sanders might well have ended up the all-time leading rusher. Then you've got Curtis Martin and Adrian Peterson at 6'7", LaDainian Tomlinson, Jerome Bettis, Eric Dickerson, Tony Dorsett. Nobody else that is active in the NFL right now is in the top 25 leading rushers. And I believe that Derrick Henry, when his career is over, will be one of the 10 best running backs of all time. And he may be in the top 5 all time if I'm right about him still having potentially 3,000 yards still to go in the future. So congrats to Derrick Henry. I like the Ravens. I like rooting for Derrick Henry. I think he's a great guy. I loved watching him play with the Titans, and I hope he has still several more good years. I'm going to dive into this and start covering it a bit more over the next several weeks. Sean Diddy Combs, Puff Daddy, is right now on trial in New York City. There are a bunch of different charges against him. His girlfriend, Cassie, has been on the witness stand alleging that she was coerced into engaging in sex trafficking behavior. There's RICO charges against him. No charges brought against anyone else, which suggests, given the fact that multiple people have to be involved, that there will be some friends, former employees that may testify against him. Based on the evidence that I have seen so far, again, based on the evidence that I have seen so far, I don't think Diddy is guilty. Now, there may be additional, and I should say guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. There may be additional testimony that leads me to change my mind, but based on what we have seen so far, the allegations from Cassie, his girlfriend of roughly 10 years, I don't think this is criminal behavior. Now, I don't think Diddy's a good guy. I don't think that he engaged in morally sound behavior, but I have not seen anything relating to Cassie yet that, to me, would prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Diddy is guilty. Now, 8 men on the jury, 4 women. They're ultimately going to be sitting there in judgment to decide whether Diddy is or is not guilty of these crimes. But I think he has a really good defense as it pertains to Cassie. She filed a civil lawsuit against him. I think that Diddy should have settled that civil lawsuit before it went public, because this is basically the roadmap for the entire criminal charges against him. And the day after the case was filed, he settled this case. So what benefit did he get from not having settled it in the first place? I've also seen the video from the Intercontinental Hotel in L.A. I've spent months of my life in that hotel. I may have been there staying in the hotel when this beating allegedly happened. That was criminal. But he's not being charged for that. That's outside the statute of limitations. So what has been alleged so far, basically for Cassie, to me comes down to coercion versus consent. And my argument, if I'm sitting on the jury pool, is that she consented to this behavior. I'm not saying that it was great behavior. I'm not saying that she loved it, but she was in a relationship with him for 10 years. How many people out there are coerced for a decade or more and don't have the agency to walk away from a relationship? I think she thought that he was going to make her a star. As a result, she was in a relationship with him, and she only left when she decided, hey, this whole star turn is not going to happen. And then she ended up, I believe, in a relationship with their personal trainer, which likely created all sorts of tension there. And again, don't mistake it. I'm not saying that Diddy is some good dude. I'm not saying that he hasn't engaged in morally repugnant behavior. I'm not saying that he might not be a jerk of the utmost degree. I'm just saying that based on the evidence that I have seen so far as it pertains to Cassie, I have not seen any evidence that he engaged in criminal behavior as it pertains to his relationship with her. Now, maybe there will be new witnesses, and I am reading and following all of this case, and I reserve the right to analyze this going forward and say, well, this other witness, boy, that's compelling testimony. This may well be criminal behavior, but a lot of times you lead as prosecution with your best witnesses because the jury's paying the most attention to the opening of the trial. They may start to fall asleep. They may not pay attention. This is the reality in the courtroom going forward. To me, there has not been anything proven that Diddy engaged in criminal behavior so far based on the relationship with Cassie. Okay. I will be back with you guys tomorrow. I appreciate all of you. I got a bunch of, I'm going to be on with Lisa Booth, by the way, The Truth with Lisa Booth. I'm about to be on as her podcast guest. I'd encourage you to go check out. I did a big deep dive with Semaphore that I think you guys will enjoy. It's up on YouTube. I shared the link to that interview. It's also a podcast if you're curious at all about the OutKick business or what we have been doing in this world. I will be back with you tomorrow. I gave you the picks at PrizePicks.com, code OutKick. $5 can turn into $50. Enjoy the games tonight. Knicks with a chance to go to the Eastern Conference Finals and match up again with the Indiana Pacers. Congrats to the Pacers. That would be like going back in time to the 1990s when Reggie Miller and Patrick Ewing were going head-to-head in those series after, for those of you who are old-school 1990s era NBA fans, that would be a matchup that would harken back to 20-some-odd years ago. All right, love all of you guys. We'll be back tomorrow, same bat time, same bat channel. As always, DBAP, unless you need to SBAP. I'm Clay Travis, and this has been OutKick, the show.